Late yesterday, I opened up the TikTok app and the very first video I saw was from Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who now apparently has a TikTok account. Immediate follow from me. He only has 2 videos as of right now. But I was just absolutely delighted. Here is an innocent man who is abducted by our government and taken away from his wife and child and stuffed into a torture gulag in El Salvador. And because elected representatives were pushed by you and me and other regular everyday Americans who came together and fought for him to be freed, Abrego Garcia was returned to the United States, where, of course, Pam Bondi's DOJ attempted to trump up some ridiculous charges against him. And he has been facing a protracted legal battle against the American government because Donald Trump and Pam Bondi want to make an example out of him. They don't want anybody to stand up for their rights, and they definitely do not want the American people to rally around those that the regime thinks that they can punish, they can throw away, they can disappear into torture prisons, into concentration camps. So they're determined to make an example out of him. And yet over and over and over again, we see the American people rallying behind Abrego Garcia. And yes, we know his story is not unique. He is one of hundreds of thousands of people who have been treated abominably by the federal government in an ethnic cleansing that they are carrying out against immigrants. But it's important, I think, that we continue to defend Abrego Garcia and we continue to watch as his story unfolds, because the wheels of justice do turn awfully slowly in this country, but there are so many victories, not just for Mr. Abrego Garcia, but what he represents for the defense of democracy. And there's an update to his story, and I want to share it with you here. So we heard a couple of days ago, I'm reading from the AP here, but lots of other outlets have covered it as well, that, Abrego Garcia was set to go to trial in this case where Pam Bondi had basically the charges against him. Okay, I'm gonna get really angry if I have to try and explain in my own words what happened with the charges that Abrego Garcia faced after basically the federal government was forced to return him from the torture prison in El Salvador. They were mad, so they wanted to punish him. Like any fragile narcissist, right? Like any fascist regime, they want to, it's all about retribution. It's all about punishment. If you stand up for yourself and your rights, if other people defend your rights, then they're gonna come down on you real hard. Any threat to Donald Trump's ego, any threat to the authoritarian advancement of this regime is met with intense bullying, intense intimidation, threats, trying to take away people's liberties. I mean, look at what happened to Letitia James and James Comey, right? Malicious prosecution for Trump's perceived slights, aka some people tried to hold him accountable for some of the many, many laws he's broken. And speaking of holding the regime accountable, they even had to admit that Abrego Garcia committed no crimes, and there was a judge's order preventing him from being sent to El Salvador, and that the federal government violated the law. They violated the judge's order when they sent him to the torture gulag there. And it was a humiliation. It was an embarrassment to the federal government. It was a check on their authoritarian overreach to have to return Abrego Garcia. And so let me read a little bit here again so I don't start swearing too much from this piece in the AP by Jesse Bedane. Abrego Garcia had become a centerpiece of the debate over immigration after the Trump regime deported him in March to a notorious prison in El Salvador, facing mounting public pressure. That was us, the people who did that, y'all. And a court order. The Trump regime brought him back to the U.S. in June, but only after issuing an arrest warrant on human smuggling charges in Tennessee. This is where I'm going to get really angry. Abrego Garcia obviously denied the allegations and argued that prosecutors were vindictively and selectively targeting him. Judge Waverly D. Crenshaw Jr. wrote in an order on Tuesday that Abrego Garcia had enough evidence to hold a hearing on the topic, which they scheduled for January 28th. So Abrego Garcia was set to go to trial for human smuggling, right? They brought him back to the country. They're like, you didn't commit any crimes, but now we're going to trump up charges against you here in the US in order to continue to deprive you of your freedom, in order to keep you locked up. And let's be clear here, the regime has tried multiple times in the intervening period to rendition Abrego Garcia to other countries because he cannot go back to El Salvador. They've tried to send him to Africa multiple times and judges have stopped it. And not only that, a judge issued that he be released from confinement. He couldn't be held in prison or in Border Patrol custody, ICE custody, while waiting for this ridiculous sham of a trial to go forward. And now he and his attorneys have brought enough information, enough evidence to the judge that they have suspended this trial for smuggling altogether in order to have this hearing to figure out, is this malicious prosecution? Is Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice doing the same thing that they tried to do to Letitia James and James Comey? Weaponizing the Department of Justice, trying to weaponize the justice system. Donald Trump, not all judges are as craven as Pam Bondi, willing to break every law, do any and everything to please Daddy Donald. But a lot of judges are simply not. And let's not forget also at the end of the day, we all get a trial by jury. There still is a place for us, the American people, to make sure that we check what the federal government is trying to do, that we are the ones who can stop them from enacting injustice against people through the court system. So basically, in 2022, Abrego Garcia was pulled over and there were 9 people in the car with him. And now Pam Bondi's DOJ is saying that that was human smuggling, even though at the time in 2022, he didn't even get a ticket. He was let go with a warning. There were no charges. There was no investigation. A Department of Homeland Security agent previously testified that he did not begin investigating this 2022 traffic stop until after the U.S. Supreme Court said in April that the Trump regime had to work to bring Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador, where he was wrongfully deported. Years earlier, Abrego Garcia had been granted a protection from deportation to his home country after a judge found that he faced danger there and that he and his family were being targeted. That order allowed Abrego Garcia, who has an American wife and an American citizen child, to live and work in the U.S. He had a legal right to be here, a legal right to work here. He was minding his own fucking business, raising his family in this country, and the federal government wrongly abducted him and deported him to a torture prison. And they intended to leave him there and let him rot there for the rest of his life. He has done nothing wrong. First of all, nobody deserves to be in CCOT. I don't give a shit what you've done. The director of CCOT said the only way you leave is in a coffin. But Abrego Garcia was returned to the U.S. because you and me and millions of other Americans were not going to let this slide. We were not going to let this innocent man be treated this way. And so there was a huge pushback from the American people. We made sure we kept the story in the headlines. Everybody, you did this. Everybody reached out to their elected officials. Senator Chris Van Hollen, a cohort of members of Congress, went down there, advocated, kept this in the forefront of the news cycle. And eventually the public pressure resulted in Abrego Garcia having to be returned here and then immediately face these trumped up charges of smuggling, which again, it wasn't until the Supreme Court said they had to bring Abrego Garcia back and the lower courts were like, yeah, get him back here now, that suddenly they started hunting around looking, how can we charge him? What charges can we trump up to continue to ruin this man's life? And now it looks like this entire case is completely falling apart because Abrego Garcia has done nothing wrong. He was illegally abducted, sent to a torture gulag. He was returned here where he has faced these trumped up charges. There was set to be a trial, and now the trial has been canceled. And the judge says, actually, bring me all the evidence. We need to have a hearing about whether this is malicious prosecution, about whether there should be a trial at all, or whether all of this should be dismissed. So that's where the case stands right now. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled for Mr. Abrego Garcia. I'm thrilled for his wife and his child. We have to continue to advocate for him and every other immigrant who is being targeted by the regime in this ethnic cleansing, who's being targeted by this regime, who wants to be able to do to you and me and your children and your neighbor exactly what they did to Abrego Garcia. They want to be able to abduct anybody, and they want to stuff them somewhere where everyone will forget about them. Remember, Donald Trump said that he wanted 6 more torture prisons built in El Salvador to house American citizens. They want you to believe that they can weaponize the justice system and put you in prison. They can manufacture whatever evidence, they can trump up whatever charges, and they can take away your freedom for maybe the rest of your life. If they can't send you to another country and disappear you, they want to disappear you into the prison system in the US. They want to do that to everybody, which is why it's so important that we continue to organize, we continue to speak out. Yes, for Mr. Abrego Garcia, but also for all of us, for the future of this country.